My wife faked a pregnancy to stop me from leaving and my mother helped her. I was sitting in my car in a clinic parking lot, holding my phone with both hands because one hand wouldn't stop shaking, and the receptionist on the other end had just told me that my wife, my pregnant wife, had never been a patient there. She'd never walked through their doors. There was no file, no record, no appointment history, not under her married name, not under her maiden name, nothing. 43 seconds, that's how long the call lasted. And in those 43 seconds, every single thing I believed about the last 2 months collapsed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I sat in that parking lot, before I made that call, before I had any idea what was already in motion around me, I was just a man trying to leave a marriage. And I didn't know yet that the two people I trusted most in this world had already decided I wasn't going to. My name is Brandon. I'm 31. I'm a structural engineer, which means I spend my days looking at buildings and telling people whether the thing holding them up is actually sound. I mention that because there's a certain irony in it. I couldn't see that the structure of my own life was rotten until it was falling on top of me. I married Audrey when I was 27. She was 25. Marketing coordinator at a skincare brand, smart, warm, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and always smelled like vanilla and bergamot and always dressed just slightly better than the occasion called for. My mother loved her immediately. That should have been my first warning, but I didn't know it yet, and I wouldn't for a long time. The first year was fine. The second year, something shifted. It was subtle. My friend Jake stopped coming around. There'd been some comment at dinner, Audrey told me, something about the way Jake had looked at her. I defended Audrey because the conflict seemed minor. Jake and I just drifted. Then my college roommate Nate stopped calling. Audrey mentioned he'd said something disrespectful about our marriage. I didn't verify it, I just let Nate go. Then it was another friend and another, and by year 3 of my marriage I went from 12 close friends to 1. And that one worked in the cubicle next to mine, which meant Audrey couldn't cut him off without quitting my job for me. I'm fairly sure she considered it. His name was Dean. He drank his coffee black, kept his beard trimmed, and was the most direct human being I'd ever met. When something was insane, Dean said it was insane, even when you didn't want to hear it. I would later understand that Dean was the only crack in the cage Audrey had built around me, but at the time I didn't call it a cage. I called it my marriage. January of this year, dinner at my mother's house. Connie, she's 58, retired school administrator, silver hair cut to her jawline, reading glasses on a chain. She always had impeccable posture and a kitchen that smelled like lemon cleaner, and she gave hugs that lasted a beat too long. She'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 14. Just packed a suitcase on a Tuesday and drove to Arizona. No fight for custody. My mother never dated again. She poured everything into me, and I loved her for it. I thought that was devotion. I couldn't have known what it actually was. That January dinner, unprompted, my mother mentioned a name I hadn't heard in years. We were talking about nothing, about holidays, about how the firm was doing, and she said, "You were so lost in college. Remember that girl Sarah? You weren't yourself back then?" She said it the way you'd mention a stomach flu you once had, something unpleasant that passed. I didn't react. I hadn't thought about Sarah Floyd in a long time, a name I would later hear in a very different context. January 12th. Lunch with Dean at the sandwich place across from our office. I'd been carrying something for weeks, and I finally said it. I think I need to leave. Dean set down his coffee, looked at me. I've been waiting 2 years for you to say that. I asked him what he meant. He said, "Every time I see you, you look like someone doing an impression of a happy person, and I kept waiting for you to notice." February 3rd. I brought it up to Audrey after dinner. I said the word separation, and the air left the room. She cried. She argued. She told me I was throwing away everything we'd built. We talked, or she talked, until 2 in the morning. She asked me what she'd done wrong. She asked me if there was someone else. She asked me if I'd ever really loved her. Each question was designed to make me feel guilty for wanting to go, and each one worked. I slept on the couch. I remember lying there, hearing her cry through the bedroom wall, and almost getting up, almost walking back through that door. There's a version of me that did, who said he was sorry, who climbed back into that bed, who stayed another year, another 5, another lifetime. I think about him sometimes. I think he's miserable and doesn't know why. In the morning I told her I'd start looking for apartments that week. 4 days later, February 7th, I came home from work and Audrey was sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up. She was shaking, not crying, shaking. She looked up at me and said, "I'm pregnant." 8 weeks, she said, which meant it happened before I'd brought up leaving, which meant the timeline made sense, which meant the apartment search was over before it started, because whatever I thought about this marriage, I was not going to be the man who walked out on his pregnant wife. I had watched my father do that math and arrive at a different answer, and I had spent 17 years hating him for it. I held her. She buried her face in my neck. Her tears were warm and they soaked through my collar, and I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when the universe makes a decision for you. I stopped looking for apartments that night. And just like that, I was back. Valentine's Day. My mother joined us for dinner. She was radiant, glowing. She held my hand across the table and said, "I'm going to be a grandmother." Audrey smiled. Connie squeezed my fingers and said, "See? Everything works out." And something odd registered. My mother already seemed to know things I hadn't told her. Specific things. The name of the clinic Audrey claimed to be using. The fact that Audrey had been having morning sickness in the evenings. Details I'd mentioned to Audrey in passing that had somehow migrated to my mother without my involvement. Small observations. I filed them. For one night, I let myself believe that everything really had worked out, that maybe I'd been wrong about the marriage, wrong about needing to leave. My mother was glowing, my wife was holding my hand, and I was the happiest I'd been in 2 years. Both of them had spent the previous week rehearsing this exact moment, but I was in it, and it felt warm, and I wanted it to be real so badly that I let it be. February 22nd. Audrey pulled out her phone at breakfast and showed me a blurry image. "From the ultrasound yesterday," she said. "Look, you can see the head." I looked. I asked if I could have a copy. She said the clinic's printer was broken, but she'd get one at the next visit. I asked to see the image again that evening. She said she deleted it because her phone storage was full. 2 excuses for 1 photograph. 2 reasons I couldn't hold physical proof. Something shifted in my chest that morning. I couldn't name it. Not suspicion exactly, more like the feeling you get when you're inspecting a building and a load-bearing wall is slightly off plumb. You can't point to the failure yet, but your hands know. Your body knows before your mind catches up. And mine was starting to dot March 1st. I asked Audrey if I could come to her next appointment. She was standing at the kitchen counter sorting mail, and her hands paused for half a second before she said, "The doctor prefers first trimester visits to be just the mother. It's their policy." I'd never heard of that policy. I pulled out my phone to look it up. Audrey said, "Don't be that husband, Brandon. Trust me." So I called my mother, not to complain, just to talk about it. And Connie's response came too fast. She didn't pause. She didn't say, "That's unusual." She said, "That's how it was when I had you. They want the mother focused. You'll have plenty of appointments later." Too specific, too rehearsed. The words had the shape of something practiced, like she'd been waiting for this exact question and had the answer loaded. I told myself I was being paranoid. But something about the way my mother and my wife gave the same answer, in the same rhythm, landed differently than it should have. And then I started doing something I'm not proud of. I started testing myself. Was I the paranoid husband? The man who'd already decided his marriage was broken and was now looking for evidence to justify it? I'd spent 3 months planning my exit before the pregnancy. Maybe I was seeing cracks because I needed them? Maybe Audrey was right and I was being that husband. The controlling one. The suspicious one. The one who couldn't accept good news because good news meant staying, and some part of me still wanted to go. I sat with that for almost a week. Let the doubt eat at me. Because here's the thing about being gaslit for 4 years without knowing it. You don't just question the liar, you question yourself first, second, and third. The liar comes fourth, if at all. March 8th was the day Audrey's pregnancy performance started to crack. Not in any dramatic way. In the small, accumulating way that systems fail. She claimed morning sickness, but it had a schedule. It appeared when Brandon suggested plans she didn't like and vanished at her mother's house. She refused to discuss baby names. "It's too early," she said at 8 weeks, then 10 weeks, then 12. She bought a single pair of maternity jeans from a Target clearance rack and wore them 3 times. She never mentioned cravings, never mentioned fatigue, never complained about the changes a body supposedly goes through when it's growing a person inside it. My wife was performing a pregnancy the way someone performs a role they researched on a flight. I cataloged these things the way I catalog structural deficiencies at work, not emotionally, clinically. Column A, what a pregnancy looks like according to every woman I've ever known who's been pregnant. Column B, what Audrey's pregnancy looked like. The columns didn't match, but I kept them in my head and I kept my mouth shut because I still didn't have proof of anything except my own suspicion, and suspicion isn't evidence. March 15th, a Saturday. I offered to drive Audrey to her appointment. Casual. I was pouring coffee when I said it. "I'll drop you off, grab lunch, pick you up after." The panic crossed her face so fast that if I hadn't been watching for it, I'd have missed it. A quarter second of raw fear, like a window thrown open and slammed shut. Then the smile. "Oh, it got rescheduled. I meant to tell you." My hand stopped mid-pour, not because of what she said, but because of that quarter second, that micro-expression. That was the first time my body knew the truth before my mind accepted it. Something cold settled into my stomach and didn't leave. March 22nd. My phone rang at work. My mother. "Audrey told me you've been pressuring her about her appointments. You need to give her space. Pregnancy is stressful enough without you hovering." I held the phone away from my face and looked at the screen like it had personally offended me. I'd had that conversation with Audrey an hour ago. 1 hour. The information had traveled from my wife to my mother faster than I could finish my lunch. And my mother's phrasing, "You need to give her space, pregnancy is stressful enough," was word for word what Audrey had said to me. The same sentence, the same cadence, they were using the same script. That night I opened my laptop and typed Lakeside Women's Health into the search bar. The website loaded. I was scanning the staff directory when Audrey walked into the living room. I closed the laptop too fast. She stopped. "What were you looking at?" "Work stuff." She held eye contact for 3 seconds. 3 full seconds where neither of us blinked and the only sound was the dishwasher running in the next room. Then she said, "Okay," and went upstairs. I cleared my browser history, not because I'd found anything, but because I realized I was now hiding my investigation from the person I was investigating, and that meant something fundamental had changed. I wasn't the trusting husband anymore. I wasn't even the suspicious husband. I was something else entirely, and I didn't have a name for it yet. That night I pretended to sleep, lay on my side with my eyes barely open and watched Audrey get out of bed at 1 in the morning. She walked downstairs. I heard my laptop open. She was checking my browser history. I'd cleared it an hour earlier, but the fact that she checked told me everything. She was watching me watch her. We were both pretending to sleep in a house where nobody was sleeping, and the pregnancy that was supposed to save this marriage had turned it into something that felt like a thriller I didn't sign up for. I almost said it. That night, lying next to her after she came back to bed, I almost rolled over and asked. The words were right there, sitting on my tongue like a hot coal. "Is there actually a baby?" I could feel the shape of the question in my mouth. I could feel the silence that would follow it. The way the room would change, the way her breathing would shift from the fake even rhythm she was performing to something real and terrified. But I didn't ask, not because I was afraid of the answer, because I realized that if I asked and she said yes, convincingly, with tears and hurt and "how dare you," then she would know I suspected. And whatever evidence existed, whatever trail she and my mother had left behind, would be gone by morning. They'd scrub it. I knew that in my bones. Because these were not amateurs. My wife had isolated every friend I'd ever had without me noticing, and my mother had managed people professionally for 30 years. If I tipped them off, I would never know the truth. So I made a decision. I chose silence. I held that question behind my teeth and swallowed it back down and lay there in the dark next to a woman I no longer believed, and I waited. It was the hardest silence of my life. March 29th. Lunch at our usual place. Dean slid his phone across the table without a word. The screen showed the Lakeside Women's Health Staff Directory page. 6 doctors listed, each with a photo and a name and credentials. I read each one, then I read them again. No Dr. Sarah Kapoor? I looked up at Dean. He picked up his coffee and drank it like he hadn't just detonated something. "I checked 2 weeks ago," he said. "Sat on it because I didn't want to be wrong." I stared at the screen. 6 faces. None of them belonged to the doctor my wife had been seeing for the last 7 weeks, because that doctor didn't exist. That doctor was a name my wife had invented, or had been given, and the only question I had left wasn't whether the pregnancy was real. It was who else already knew it wasn't. I pushed Dean's phone back across the table. "I don't think she's seeing a doctor, man," Dean said. I didn't answer. I was looking at my hands. They were steady, perfectly steady. And somewhere underneath that steadiness, something had broken so completely that I couldn't feel it yet, like a bone that snaps clean and doesn't hurt for the first 30 seconds. I was in those 30 seconds. The pain was coming. April 1st. I sat in a coffee shop bathroom stall with my phone in my hands and reverse image searched the ultrasound. I'd screenshotted it weeks earlier, the night Audrey showed me. She'd held her phone up at breakfast and said, "Look, you can see the head," and I'd taken a screenshot when she wasn't looking because I wanted to have a copy. At the time I told myself it was sentimental. I wanted to remember the moment I first saw my child. Now I was sitting on a bathroom floor with the screen shaking in my grip, watching the results load. The image matched. A parenting blog from 2019. A stock ultrasound used in an article about first trimester milestones. The same grainy black and white image with the same slightly blurred edges. My wife had shown me a picture she found on the internet and told me it was our child. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I set it on the tile floor and pressed my palms against my knees and breathed. The bathroom smelled like industrial soap, and someone had scratched something illegible into the stall door, and the fluorescent light above me buzzed at a pitch that I can still hear when I close my eyes. I sat there for 11 minutes. I know because I checked the time when I finally stood up. I walked back to my table. My coffee was cold. I drank it anyway. April 8th. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a strip mall during my lunch break and called Lakeside Women's Health. I told the receptionist I wanted to confirm my wife's next appointment, Audrey Morales, under Dr. Sarah Kapoor. The receptionist paused. I heard keys clicking. Then she said, "We don't have a provider by that name." I said Kapoor, Kapoor. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no one on our staff by that name, and I don't have a patient record for an Audrey Morales." She paused again. "Or an Audrey Armstrong." She'd checked both names without me asking. She was being thorough. I almost thanked her for that, for being the one honest person in this equation. 43 seconds. That's how long the call lasted. I know because I looked at the call log afterward, sitting in that same car, in that same parking lot, staring at a phone screen that had just dismantled the last remaining possibility that I was wrong. 43 seconds to confirm that my wife had never been pregnant, had never visited that clinic, had never sat in a waiting room, or filled out paperwork, or heard a heartbeat that belonged to someone we made together. I sat in my car for 40 minutes. No tears came. I didn't call Dean. I didn't call my mother. The engine was off and the windows up and the spring sun heating the dashboard, and I thought about every single moment of the last 2 months. The announcement, the tears, the ultrasound. Valentine's dinner, my mother holding my hand and saying, "See, everything works out," and I thought, she knew. My mother knew. She'd known from the beginning. Because information doesn't travel that fast between two people unless they're coordinating, and the only thing my mother and my wife had ever coordinated on was me. I called Dean from the parking lot. He picked up on the first ring. Didn't even say hello. He said, "I know." I said, "It's all fake." He said, "Yeah." April 9th. Audrey left for work at 8:15. I waited until her car turned the corner. Then I went inside. Her iPad was on the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl where she always left it. It was synced to her phone. I knew the passcode because we'd set up the devices together and Audrey used the same 6 digits for everything. I picked it up, opened messages. The thread between Audrey and Mom C went back to February 4th. The day after I told Audrey the first wanted to separate. Hundreds of messages. I stood at that counter and I read them, and each one was worse than the one before. February 4th, Connie to Audrey. "Tell him you're 8 weeks. That makes it seem like it happened before the conversation." February 7th, Connie. "Cry when you tell him. Not too much, just enough that he feels guilty for wanting to leave." February 22nd, Connie. "I found a good ultrasound image online, sending it now. Tell him the printer was broken." March 1st, Connie. "If he asks to come to an appointment, tell him it's doctor's policy. I'll back you up if he calls me." March 15th, Connie. "He's getting suspicious. Don't improvise. Call me before you answer any of his questions." I put the iPad down after that one. Walked outside. Stood in my backyard with my hands on the railing of the deck and stared at the grass and breathed. My mother had typed those words. My mother had sat somewhere in her clean kitchen with her reading glasses on her chain and her impeccable posture and her lemon-scented countertops, and typed, "Cry when you tell him, not too much, just enough." She had coached my wife on how to cry for me. She had stage-directed my emotions like I was a student in her old school, and she was managing another difficult parent. I went back inside, picked up the iPad, kept reading. March 29th, Connie to Audrey. "We just need to get to 12 weeks. After that, it becomes real enough that he won't question it." I'd wondered about 12 weeks. I'd wondered what the end game was. If the pregnancy was fake, it couldn't last. At some point, the math would stop working. At some point, there would need to be a belly, a doctor, a birth. What was the plan? The plan was in the next message. March 30th, Connie to Audrey. "After 12 weeks, tell him you had a miscarriage. By then he'll have bonded with the idea. He won't leave a wife who just lost a baby. That buys us another year at least." I read that message 3 times. A fake pregnancy followed by a fake miscarriage. My mother hadn't just lied about a baby. She had planned my grief. She had budgeted it, scheduled it like a dentist appointment. She was going to let me believe I'd lost a child. She was going to watch me mourn something that never existed, and she was going to comfort me through that mourning, and she was going to use that grief as mortar to seal me into a marriage I'd been trying to leave. Another year at least. That was the phrase. Another year at least. Like my life was a lease she was renewing. My mother had planned my grief. There is no version of that sentence that gets easier the more times you say it. I photographed every screen, every message, every timestamp. I was methodical about it. Took each screenshot with a thread scrolled to show the date, the sender, and the full message. 47 screenshots in all. My hands were steady again. That strange, clean steadiness that comes after the bone has already broken and the shock has set in and your body decides to be useful because your mind has left the building. I was photographing the last screen when I heard Audrey's car in the driveway. She was home early, 40 minutes early. I locked the iPad, set it back exactly where it had been, propped against the fruit bowl at the same angle. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower. When Audrey called my name through the door, I said, "Just got home, taking a shower." My phone was in my jacket pocket on the bathroom counter. 47 screenshots. She was in the kitchen, 3 feet from where I'd found the iPad, and I was standing in a bathroom full of steam, listening to her open the refrigerator and hum something I didn't recognize. That night, I told Audrey the first had a late project deadline and drove to Dean's apartment. I sat on his couch and handed him my phone. He scrolled through the screenshots without speaking. It took him almost 20 minutes to read them all. When he got to the 12 weeks message, he stopped. Read it again, set the phone down on the coffee table, and didn't speak for a full minute. She was going to make you grieve, he said. I looked at him. She was going to make you grieve. He said it twice because once wasn't enough to hold the weight of it, neither was twice. I slept on Dean's couch that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a baby that never existed, and the two women who built it out of text messages and a stock photo, and my own willingness to believe that something in my life had finally gone right. April 10th. I went home. Dean had offered to come with me. I told him no. This was something I had to do in the same kitchen where the texts were sent, at the same table where the ultrasound was shown to me, in the house that was supposed to be ours and turned out to be a stage. Audrey got home at 5:40. She set her bag on the counter, pulled her hair out of its clip, and said, "Do you want me to start dinner?" I was sitting at the kitchen table. I said, "Sit down." She looked at me. Something in my voice registered, because her hand went to the back of a chair and her knuckles whitened. She sat. I started with questions I already knew the answers to. Not to trap her, to watch the architecture collapse in real time. When is your next appointment? Thursday. What's Dr. Kapoor's first name? A pause. Sarah. What did the ultrasound tech say about the heartbeat at your last visit? Longer pause. That it was strong. What was the heart rate? Silence. What room were you in? What floor is the OB wing on? What color are the chairs in the waiting room? Each question was a door slamming shut. Her answers moved from specific to vague to contradictory to nothing. She started crying. The same tears she'd used in February, the same tears my mother had coached her on. But this time the formula was visible to me. I could see the mechanism, and I waited. I let the silence do the work. I called the clinic Audrey. She closed her eyes. They don't have a Dr. Kapoor. They don't have you as a patient. Not under Morales, not under Armstrong. You've never been there. She pressed her hands flat against the table. Her fingers were trembling. The trembling was real. Whatever came next, the fear in her body was genuine. She whispered, "Your mother told me it was the only way." The room tilted. Not physically, but something inside my perception shifted, like the moment in an earthquake before you understand it's an earthquake. You know the ground moved. You don't know how far. She called me, Audrey said. The morning after you told me you wanted to leave. She called me and she was calm. She wasn't panicked. She had the whole plan. The timing, the ultrasound, the fake doctor, the symptoms to mention. She said she'd back me up on everything. She said if we could just get you past the first trimester, you'd never leave. And you just did it. She's your mother, Brandon. She said it was the only way to keep you. And I believed her because I didn't want to lose you either. I looked at the woman across from me, 29 years old, crying at a kitchen table, and I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't hate her. I should have. She'd lied to me for 2 months about a child that didn't exist. She'd performed a pregnancy, faked an ultrasound, invented a doctor. But sitting across from her, watching her fall apart, all I could see was someone who'd been handed a script by a woman she couldn't say no to. Audrey wasn't the architect. She was the instrument. She told me one more thing, the line that reframed everything. Your mother said, "This is what I should have done when Keith wanted to leave. If I'd been braver, your father-in-law would still be here." My mother had been replaying her own divorce through my marriage. The pregnancy scheme wasn't desperation. It was a second draft. She'd spent 17 years revising the story of how her husband left, and she'd finally found the version where she stopped it from happening. Except it wasn't her husband. It was me. I asked Audrey one more question. Was there anything real? She looked at me with red eyes and said, "I really didn't want you to leave." The tragedy was that I believed her. That part was true. She just let someone else decide how to keep me. I stood up, told her I'd be staying at Dean's. She didn't argue. She sat at the table with her hands flat on the surface, perfectly still, like if she moved the whole structure would finish collapsing. Maybe she was right. April 11th. I drove to my mother's house. Dean drove. I'd asked him to because I didn't trust my hands on the wheel and I didn't trust myself to not turn around halfway there. Dean parked across the street and said, "I'll be here." Connie opened the door smiling. She was holding a small gift bag, yellow tissue paper sticking out the top. She held it up before I'd even crossed the threshold. I couldn't help myself. I know it's early, but look. She pulled out a pair of baby shoes. Tiny, yellow, gender neutral. She held them in her palm like they were made of glass. "Mom, they were on sale. I know you're not supposed to buy things before the second trimester, but I saw them and I just thought, there's no Dr. Kapoor." Her smile didn't drop immediately. It froze, hung there on her face like a painting left on the wall of a house that's already been sold. Then she tried to redirect. "Audrey probably gave you the wrong name. You know how she—" "Mom, I have the texts." The shift happened in 3 stages: confusion, recognition, and then something that was not guilt. It was calculation. I watched my mother's eyes move the way they probably moved in 100 meetings at her old school when a parent said something she didn't expect. She was assessing, measuring how much I knew, deciding which version of the truth to deploy. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, "to watch your son throw his life away." By leaving a marriage I was miserable in? By leaving, period. Her voice cracked. This was real emotion, the first genuine thing she'd shown me in months. "You don't understand what leaving does to a family. I do." "Sarah," I said. The baby shoes were still in her hand. The silence after that name lasted long enough for me to count to 3. Her fingers tightened around the tiny yellow shoes. She set the gift bag down very carefully on the entry table, like it mattered. Like anything in it had ever been real. "You drove to her dorm," I said. "You told her I was seeing someone else. She didn't deny it. She wasn't right for you. You showed her a photo, me and Courtney, my cousin." My mother's mouth opened, her lips parted, and nothing came out. This detail she hadn't expected. She didn't know I knew about the photo. I didn't, not for certain. I was bluffing, guessing based on the pattern, the same way I diagnose a structural failure by extrapolating from visible cracks. But her face confirmed it. Her face told me everything her mouth wouldn't. "I was protecting you," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "From what?" "From becoming your father." That sentence broke something in me that has not repaired itself and may never repair itself, because I understood it all at once. Every manipulation, every controlled relationship, every introduced girlfriend, every intercepted friendship, every coached tear, every fake doctor, every stock ultrasound. She wasn't protecting me. She was re-engineering her own divorce with a different ending. I wasn't her son. I was Keith, the version she got to keep. I stood to leave. My mother grabbed my arm. Not violent, desperate. Her fingers dug into the fabric of my sleeve and held on. "You can't leave, Brandon, you can't." I pulled free. She followed me to the door. She said something that nearly made me question my own understanding of what had happened. "I knew you'd react like this. That's why I had to do it quietly, because you never would have understood." I stopped, turned around. "You planned my grief, Mom. You were going to make me mourn a baby that doesn't exist. You scheduled my miscarriage. To keep you." I stared at her. 58 years old, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. The woman who taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with every science project and drove 4 hours to my college graduation and cried in the parking lot because she was so proud. The woman who typed "cry when you tell him, not too much, just enough" into her phone and pressed send. "You kept me in a box for 12 years, I said. My voice was quiet. The rage had already burned through, and what was underneath it was something worse, something that didn't have a temperature. "And the worst part is I helped you build it." I turned and walked to the door. I didn't slam it. I pulled it shut with the careful, measured precision of a man who knows that if he doesn't control this one small thing, he'll lose control of everything. Through the closed door, I heard my mother slide down against it. I heard the gift bag crinkle under her as she landed on it. The baby shoes were in that bag, yellow, gender neutral, bought for a baby that was never coming. I got in the car. Dean didn't ask. He started the engine. Neither of us spoke for 7 minutes. I counted because if I didn't count something, I was going to scream, and the scream that was building in my chest was not the kind that stops once it starts. My mother's street disappeared in the side mirror. I watched the houses get smaller, and I thought, I haven't made a single major decision on my own since I was 19 years old. The 2 people who made them for me are both behind me now, one at a kitchen table, one on the floor behind a door. And I am driving away from both of them with nothing but a phone full of screenshots and the first honest silence I've had in 12 years. I filed for divorce the same week I moved into Dean's spare room. Audrey signed without contesting. She sent me one message afterward. "I know this doesn't help, but I really am sorry." She convinced me it was the only way. I should have known better. I didn't respond, not out of anger. I just had nothing left to say to the person my mother chose for me. The divorce was finalized in May. 4 years of marriage reduced to a stack of paperwork and 2 signatures. I kept almost nothing. The apartment furniture was hers. The kitchen was hers. The life we'd built was a set she'd decorated according to someone else's blueprints. I took my clothes, my laptop, my engineering books, and a box of things from before the marriage. That box was smaller than I expected. Late April, while the paperwork was still moving, I did something I'd been thinking about since the night at Connie's house. I opened Instagram and searched for Sarah Floyd. Her profile picture showed a woman with dark curly hair and freckles, standing in front of a veterinary clinic in Portland. She was smiling, but not the way she used to smile. Something had settled behind her eyes. The kind of expression that comes from learning to be happy again after being happy was taken from you. I sent a message. "This is Brandon. I need to ask you something about my mother. I understand if you don't want to respond." She responded in 20 minutes. We talked on the phone for 2 hours. Her voice was warm, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that surfaced every time she mentioned Connie. Sarah wasn't just sad. She was angry. 6 years of anger she'd been carrying without anyone to aim it at because the target had been invisible. She told me what happened in 2016. She was in her dorm, sophomore year. My mother drove 3 hours to the campus, sat on Sarah's bed and cried, real tears. Connie told Sarah that I'd been seeing someone else for months but was too much of a coward to end things. She said she was telling Sarah because Sarah deserved better. She said, let him go. Sarah believed her. She believed her because my mother sat there with tears streaming down her face and seemed genuinely heartbroken about it. Connie didn't come across as manipulative. She came across as a mother in pain, trying to do the right thing. Did you ever wonder why I just texted you? Sarah asked. Why I didn't call, didn't come find you, didn't ask for an explanation? I said, every day for about a year. Because your mother looked me in the eyes and said, he'll deny it, that's what men do. Please don't give him the chance to lie to you too. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was being strong. She'd broken up with me by text because my mother told her that hearing my voice would weaken her resolve. My mother had preempted the conversation that might have saved us. Then Sarah said something I wasn't prepared for. The detail I'd been guessing about during the confrontation with Connie, the bluff I'd thrown out to watch my mother's reaction. She brought a photo, Brandon. My grip tightened on the phone. A photo of you at some barbecue with your arm around a girl. She said it was the other woman. She said she was sorry she had to show me, but I deserved to know the truth. The room around me went very still. That was my cousin Courtney, I said. She's my cousin. Silence on the line. I know that now, Sarah said. My mother had manufactured physical evidence. She hadn't just told a lie, she'd built a case. She'd printed a photograph of me with my arm around my cousin at a family gathering and driven it 3 hours to a college dorm and presented it with tears as proof of infidelity. The pregnancy scheme wasn't an escalation, it was a refinement. She'd been doing this for over a decade, and she'd gotten better at it each time. Sarah and I stayed on the phone for a long time after that. Mostly quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when two people realize they were both looking at different pieces of the same broken thing and neither had enough to see the whole picture until now. Before she hung up, Sarah sent me a voice message. I listened to it after we said goodbye. She said, I waited 6 years for you to ask me that. Her voice caught on the word 6, not crying. Just the sound of a person whose throat suddenly remembers what 6 years of misplaced grief feels like. I spent 6 years thinking you lied to me. I grieved us, and it was never even real. She made it up. She sat on my bed and she made it up. The summer passed in a way that felt like learning to use a limb after a cast comes off. Awkward, functional, but wrong. I found an apartment. I bought a table and 2 chairs from a second-hand store. I hung nothing on the walls. Connie sent letters, 14 of them over the course of 5 months. I lined them up on Dean's coffee table one night and we counted them. Dean said, she's averaging 1 every 10 days. That's commitment. I laughed for the first time in weeks. The sound was strange and I didn't care. I didn't open the letters. She called. I'd changed my number. She showed up at my office once. I watched through the conference room glass as my mother argued with a receptionist, then stopped mid-sentence, smoothed her hair, straightened her posture, and walked out of the building without looking back. She was performing composure for an audience that wasn't there. She couldn't stop managing, even when there was nothing left to manage. October, 6 months out. My new apartment had a kitchen I was slowly learning to use. No photos on the walls. A second-hand table with 2 chairs, one of which no one had ever sat in. I was cooking dinner, rice and chicken. The rice was overcooked, and the chicken was under-seasoned, and I was eating it standing at the counter because standing felt more honest than pretending to have a dinner table life. My phone buzzed. Forwarded message from Audrey. A photograph of a card. Connie had sent it to Audrey. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting that signed my permission slips and wrote "proud of you" on birthday cards and addressed the envelopes of 14 letters I'd never opened. Thank you for trying to keep the family together. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. Not sorry for the lie. Not sorry for the fabricated pregnancy or the stock ultrasound or the coached tears or the planned miscarriage or the photo of a cousin presented as an affair. Sorry it didn't work. A thank you note to the woman who helped deceive her own son. Below it, in smaller handwriting, almost an afterthought. He'll come back, they always do. I set the phone face down on the counter. Then I walked to the closet where I'd been keeping Connie's 14 letters in a shoebox. I took out the first one. Opened it. My mother's handwriting, careful and even. I know you're angry, but one day you'll understand that everything I did was because I love you. I folded it, put it back, didn't open the other 13. Not because I was afraid of what was inside, because I already knew. Every single one would say the same thing in different words, and she would mean all of it. Every letter was written by a woman who genuinely believed that what she did was love, that the coaching, the lies, the manufactured evidence, the planned grief were all expressions of a devotion so total it couldn't see its own shape. That's what makes it unbearable. Not the betrayal, the sincerity behind it. I went back to the kitchen. The rice was cold. I looked at the wall where photos should be and thought about the fact that I didn't miss Audrey. Not her voice, not her laugh, not the smell of vanilla and bergamot. I had been waiting for the grief over my marriage to arrive, and it never did. That absence told me everything about what the marriage actually was. But my mother I miss every single day. And that's the grief that has no resolution because the woman I miss never existed. The real Connie is the one who sat on a 19-year-old girl's bed with a photograph of a cousin and lied with tears running down her face. The real Connie typed "cry when you tell him, not too much, just enough," and pressed send. The real Connie loved me so completely that she hollowed out my entire adult life to keep me within arm's reach. I'm standing in a kitchen I chose, in an apartment I found, eating a meal I made badly, and no one in the world is managing me. No one is coaching me on what to feel. No one is protecting me from the terrible, necessary freedom of making my own choices and living with what they cost. It's the loneliest I've ever been, and it belongs to me. The rice was terrible. I made it again the next night.